The Champions League is finally back again, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my predictions for the first leg games in the Champions League quarterfinals. If you guys have been keeping up with these Champions League videos, you would know that I've been making predictions for the group stages, the round of 16, and now we are finally at the quarterfinals. And I think these games are where it really starts to get difficult for these predictions. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys all my score predictions for the first leg games, and then next week I'll be uploading my predictions for the second leg games. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. Starting off with the first match, and this is a very difficult game. We have Arsenal against Bayern Munich. If we compare both of these teams in their respective domestic leagues so far this season, I do think Arsenal are definitely having the better season. Bayern Munich, yes, they do have an incredible team, incredible players, and also a very good manager. But this season, they just haven't looked that good in the Bundesliga. They have 5 losses, 3 draws, and only 19 wins, which is still obviously very good, but it's not as good as what we normally see from Bayern Munich. This season in the Bundesliga, Bayer Leverkusen have definitely been the better team over Bayern Munich. And obviously the Champions League is very different than the Bundesliga, because in the Champions League, experience and the history of the club does matter a lot. And Bayern Munich definitely have that experience and that history over a team like Arsenal. But I just think Arsenal, especially in recent months, have been playing absolutely incredibly. Arsenal in 2024 are still yet to lose a Premier League game. They have won almost every single game they've been playing in the Premier League, and they've been winning these games pretty comfortably. We've seen them score 3, 4, 5, even 6 goals so far this year in the Premier League. And yes, obviously they did draw their more recent game against Manchester City, but Manchester City are one of the best teams in the world, and for that reason I still think that is a very good result from Arsenal. But there are 2 problems that Arsenal have going into this game. 1, they don't have the same Champions League experience that Bayern Munich have, and 2, in their recent Champions League round of 16 fixtures against Porto, they were not convincing at all. And I do think Arsenal need to play much better than how they did against Porto if they even want a chance against Bayern Munich. I feel like Bayern Munich should be the favorites in this matchup, but with this game being played obviously in London, Arsenal being on incredible form in the Premier League at the moment, I think a lot of people are actually favoring Arsenal in this matchup. But I personally think that Bayern Munich are still the favorites, and this will be very tough for Arsenal. I'm not going to say anything about what I think will happen in the second leg, but in this first leg, with the home advantage, I do think Arsenal are capable of getting at least a draw from this game. I think it will be very difficult for both teams. I feel like they will both have a little bit of trouble scoring, and for that reason, I'm going to predict a 1-1 draw. Moving on to the next matchup on Tuesday, we have Real Madrid against Manchester City. For me, this is the matchup where I'm most excited for, because if you guys remember, we saw this matchup last season in the Champions League, the year before in the Champions League, and every single time Real Madrid come up against Man City, these matchups are always absolutely crazy. If you guys remember what happened last year in the Champions League, Real Madrid did draw against Man City in the first game, but in the second leg fixture, Manchester City absolutely destroyed Real Madrid 4-0. It was an absolute demolition. But if we look at the year before last year, the year that Real Madrid did eventually win the Champions League, in both fixtures they played absolutely incredible, and they did end up knocking out Manchester City. I feel like this is probably the toughest game to predict, because we see Manchester City this season look very good, but I don't think Man City have been as good as they were last season. I think especially on the defensive side of things, they were much better last season than they have been this season. But we have also seen some star players like Phil Foden play absolutely incredibly, and if we know anything about Foden, he can do anything in a game like this. But I feel like Real Madrid have been a little bit slept on this season, because they have been playing very well in the La Liga. They have won so many games in recent months, and I think they're playing very good. But again, similarly to Arsenal in the round of 16, Real Madrid didn't look that convincing against RB Leipzig. I thought in the first leg it was a very scrappy match, and I personally thought that Leipzig deserved to win that game over Real Madrid. Obviously in the end, Real Madrid did end up advancing on aggregate as they were up by 1 goal. But I think they have to play much better than how they did against Leipzig if they want a chance to beat Manchester City. If we take in everything to account, their injuries, their form, and their recent head-to-heads in the Champions League, I think in this fixture, with Real Madrid playing at home, I definitely think they have the advantage over Manchester City. And I think that they can actually win this matchup. Now, in the second leg, when they play in England, it will be much tougher for Real Madrid. But in this fixture with the home advantage, history does tell us that Real Madrid will at least score a few goals in this game. And for that reason, I do think they will be able to beat Manchester City. I think that the score will be 2-1 for Real Madrid. Moving on to the Wednesday fixtures, and the first matchup we got, I think, is a pretty underrated matchup. We have Atletico Madrid against Dortmund. Obviously, I've been hearing a lot of people say that this matchup is the more not so good matchup, the lower quality teams, but in my opinion, I think both of these teams have been absolutely outstanding this season. They have been very entertaining, and I think this would be a very tough match. If we look at recent form, I think Atletico Madrid have been a very inconsistent team. We've seen them in the La Liga suffer big defeats. Recently against Barcelona, they lost 3-0. We've seen them lose 3-0 to Athletic Club, 2-0 to Cadiz, but also they have gotten a few big wins recently, and especially in the Champions League, they have been probably one of the better teams so far. In the group stages, they versed a lot of tough teams, and obviously in the round of 16, they did beat Inter Milan, who were one of the favorites to win this whole Champions League. On the other hand, Borussia Dortmund have been on very good form in the Bundesliga, and recently we saw them beat Bayern Munich 2-0, which was pretty unexpected. But in the Champions League, obviously it is different from the Bundesliga. But even in the Champions League, Borussia Dortmund have been one of the best performing teams out of all the teams so far. In the group stages, we saw Borussia Dortmund finish in first place ahead of the likes of PSG, AC Milan, and even Newcastle. And in the round of 16, they were coming up against PSV Eindhoven, who are a very good team. They're actually one of the most informed teams in the world right now, and Dortmund made no problem of it. They beat them pretty comfortably, especially in the second leg. And for that reason, I think Atletico Madrid will have a very tough time against Dortmund. We've seen how good some of the Atletico Madrid players have been playing this season, especially some of their forwards like Morata and Griezmann. And again, with that home advantage, I do think they will win this game. I think it will be a very close game. Both teams will struggle to score, in my opinion, but I do think Atletico Madrid will just come out on top with a 1-0 victory. And finally, the last game we got in the first leg fixtures of the quarterfinals is PSG against FC Barcelona. I was already said that I was the most excited for Real Madrid versus Man City game, but I think that this is going to be a very entertaining game, and I think there's going to be a lot of goals in this game. PSG are obviously first place in the Liga, which isn't that surprising, but if we look back to the start of the season, it was a little bit of a rough start. We saw them constantly drawing in games where realistically they should have been winning, and I think at one point they were even sat in 3rd or 4th place in the Liga. Obviously in recent weeks they have picked up their form. They're winning almost every single game they play, and with players like Kylian Mbappe already having 20 plus goals this season, I think they are definitely the favorites in this matchup. But on the other hand, Barcelona, who have been a little bit inconsistent so far this season, in recent weeks they have really stepped up their form. We have seen them win in their last 4 or 5 games. They're scoring a lot of goals, and we have seen so many youngsters play absolutely incredibly for Barcelona. Obviously, they have suffered a lot of injuries this season with players like Frankie de Jong, Pedri, Gavi, Christensen, Balde. They have suffered a lot of injuries to some of their key players in that squad. But with these injuries, we have seen a lot of youngsters really start to shine. We've seen the likes of Kubarsi, Fermin Lopez, and especially Lamine Yamal play absolutely incredibly. And if we remember anything about the Napoli versus Barca game, where Barcelona's youngsters were absolutely incredible in that match, I think they could possibly pull off an upset against PSG. Honestly, I keep saying it for every single game that they are just so hard to predict, and that tells us how good these quarterfinal matchups are. I think every single game is a tough prediction. I don't think there is any game where one team is guaranteed to win over the other team. If we look at the history between PSG and Barcelona, there is a lot of history, crazy comebacks, crazy scorelines, and I think this will be another crazy game with a lot of goals. With PSG having the home advantage, I do think they are just going to edge it over Barcelona. I do think they will just get the win, but I think it's going to be very close. I think both teams are going to score multiple goals, but I feel like Mbappe is just going to be too much for the Barcelona defense. I think he might get a brace and maybe even a hat-trick. And for that reason, I think PSG are going to win this game 3-2. And that is the end of my first leg predictions for the Champions League quarterfinals. If you guys want to see my predictions for the second leg, that video will be coming out next week. Obviously a few days before the second leg games. If you guys agree with my predictions, remember to leave a comment down below. But if you disagree with my predictions and you think there might be an upset here or there, maybe Dortmund will beat Madrid, maybe Barcelona will beat PSG, remember to leave your predictions down below with the scoreline as well. And obviously, if you did enjoy this video, remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more videos.